Hold on everyone, we're going back to my childhood. My first computer was an old Tandy. I can't remember the actual model, but it was old as dirt and ran DOS 6.2 shell and Windows 3.1. Yeah, Windows 3.1. After that, I had an old IBM Aptiva, which ran Windows 95, and eventually I upgraded that to Windows 98. So, why am I telling you this? Do you remember when you had to load games from a command prompt? No? It must be getting old. Anyway, I'm reviewing Zargon this time around, which is a DOS game by Epic Mega Games. Yeah, the guys who made Unreal Tournament have been around for quite a bit of time. It was released in 1993, and in order to run it on my Windows 8 PC, I need to run it in DOSBox. But it works, which is the important part. Zargon takes place over 3 different episodes. Back in the day, many DOS games were like this. Basically, 1 or 2 episodes would be released as shareware, or what would be considered in modern times as demos. In fact, the developers used to promote players giving the shareware to your friends. Then when you're finished playing it or you leave the game, it'll give you the ordering information for any remaining episodes, and often include promotions such as cheat codes and walkthroughs. You play as Malvinius Haversham, an archaeologist who is working in ruins and gets sucked into an alternate dimension. He then has to fight evil creatures and robots to save both this parallel realm and also your home universe. In order to do this, you need to find 3 ancient and powerful relics in each episode and destroy some sort of reactor. I believe these reactors are what's spawning the robots. You do this in all 3 episodes, but in the final one, you fight the final evil entity, known as Zargon. You never find out why Zargon is pursuing the downfall of the worlds. It's pretty disappointing. The game builds up a bit by telling the story in 2 main methods. First, you meet an eagle named Silvertongue. He's the one who brought Mal here, and he explains a few things here and there, but more often than not, he leaves more questions than answers. You also get journal entries on the map screen. Those are often just insight on what Mal's emotions are at the time. The story isn't exactly the strong point of the game. You often get references to the Blue Builders, who was the ancient race that built the ruins that Mal was exploring. But the game never actually explains who the Blue Builders are and their role in the game. There's just so many plot holes in this game, which kinda sucks. When you start the actual game, you're immediately thrown onto the map screen. It's interesting at first, but then you realize the nuances of the map. First, the paths are incredibly narrow and can be difficult to navigate through. This is because if you get too close to an edge when you try to change directions, you often get stuck to the border of the path. Next, although the map shows multiple stages you can enter, you can only do them in what's almost completely linear order. Sometimes you'll have an option of 2 or 3 stages, but you have to complete both of them and find the gate keys in each before you actually progress on. So there's a map, but in truth, it's not entirely necessary. Oh, and the map screen is the only place you can save your game too. Alright, let's get on to the actual game. At its core, it's a 2D platformer with a few minor puzzles thrown in. You don't jump on enemies like many other platformers, but instead shoot lasers at them. You only get 1 laser at a time, but you can obtain additional lasers by picking up power-ups or buying them in the store. One of the coolest things you can do is control the direction of the laser beam as you fire it. If you shoot one and hold up or down, it'll slant in that direction. This allows you to attack enemies that aren't on the same height as you. You can also find rocks, which I'll get to in a bit. The final weapon is sort of rare, and it's a fireball. It'll demolish everything in its path, but it can't be controlled like the laser. The rock gets featured every once in a while, and let me just say that since you don't get it as often as the laser, you'd think that it would be more powerful, or at least better, right? Wrong. The rock sucks. And once you pick it up, you can't revert back to the laser until you either die or end the level. Basically, once you throw it, it goes in an arc and starts bouncing around until it falls off the screen or hits an enemy. It does no more or less damage than the laser. It's just an alternate weapon. And there's an oddity to it as well. Sometimes when you throw a rock, its trajectory will alter and the rock will bolt towards the enemy, or even hook around like a boomerang. What the hell? Why does it do that? And what's worse is that many of the levels that contain the rock places it where you can't avoid it. It sucks. And besides, why don't you start with the rocks and power up with the lasers? Aren't lasers a more powerful and threatening thing than a frickin' rock that sounds like it's made of plastic? Now, I mentioned that you can buy extra lasers. You find emeralds in the game, and carry a max of 99. By pressing the B key, you bring up the shopping menu. This includes fireballs, extra lasers, an extra health unit, or even invulnerability. This invulnerability option is awesome in the final levels of each episode. When you hit the reactors, enemies will continuously spawn, and if you use the invulnerability power-up, naturally you won't get hurt. So you can just blast the reactor without worrying about getting hit and dying. Speaking of dying, You get 5 health units and infinite lives. There's plenty of hearts laying around the stages, and if you collect 16 pieces of fruit, that would constitute a heart as well. If you don't need the extra health when you collect the 16th piece, it'll remain at 16 until you get hit, which will then give you the extra health point and reset the fruit count right to 0. The other thing is, although you have 5 health points, you need to be careful because there's no real recovery time. If you get hit, you can get hit immediately again. However, if you touch a monster and get hurt, as long as the monster doesn't detach from your body, you won't take any more damage from that monster itself until another obstacle strikes you. For example, if you hit a troll, move off of it, and immediately get hit with one of its projectiles, you're taking 2 points of damage. The interesting thing about the game is that you do have infinite lives. If you die, you start the level over, but your score and any items you used, bought, or found are reset. So it's essentially as if your previous attempts never even existed. Now, I keep focusing on the negatives about the game, but here's the thing. There's quite a few odd cons to the game, but overall it's actually pretty good. Because now we move on to the actual gameplay, and that's where the game actually shines. Typically, your goal is to go from the start to the end, collecting any gate keys or power items that may be present, and occasionally find keys that are only specific to that stage. One thing to keep in mind is that weapons you do collect in each level disappear when you get to the exit. The only difference is the fireballs do remain from stage to stage, but this usually isn't an issue. In fact, many times, you're just happy to get rid of that damn rock. As for the stages themselves, they really feel like an alternate dimension. They are very detailed, and contain planet life in some of the brighter stages and creepy dark scenes for places that resemble dark forested areas and ruins. One particular area that really contains quite a bit of detail is the underwater zones. The water looks menacing and violent, and the plant life exists all over the place. The environments aren't the only thing that look good. Most of the enemies look amazing as well. Some creatures look like they were cheaped out on though, like the trolls, but it's satisfying to smash a robot and watch them crash to the ground in a trail of flames. But is it me, or do these things look like disembodied hands? Anyway, it's a basic platformer, but it's solid. The controls feel right, and there's never really a time that you get frustrated because of them. Although it can be a slight hassle to learn how to jump off of ropes, once you figure out that you need to hold Alt to jump before moving off the rope, it's easy enough. The music fits the game as well. Although it does start getting old when you get to the 3rd episode, overall it's moody, and it fits each level well. However, it is disappointing that the final stage has no special music. At least, not at first. The second part of the last stage does have some different music, but it doesn't feel epic or climactic. The sound effects, that's a completely different story. They don't seem to fit. Monsters make odd grunting sounds when destroyed or hurt, although they aren't human. I've already mentioned that the rock sounds don't fit at all. However, they're not all bad. One point of interest is that when jumping through a waterfall, you'll hear Malvinius hold his breath. Not something big, it's still pretty cool. Another feature is that Mal has a chance to enter a submersible underwater pod, or SUP.
What's
You use this to traverse underwater areas. Although somewhat sparse, this is a nice change of pace from the standard run, jump, and shoot of the typically side-scrolling sections. The SUP can only fire one projectile on each side, and you can't fire another one until both sides of the shot leave the screen. You can sometimes crush a little red fish without taking damage, but the biggest downfall of the pod is that it seems to move too fast for its own good. Because of this, it's sometimes difficult to maneuver in tight spots and hit your enemies without taking damage yourself. You also get a chance to become a bee. That's right, a bee. This is fun though, because you get to fly around and still shoot lasers, but the game doesn't seem to utilize this shape-shifting feature often enough. It's rare that you encounter this form, and a few of the times it's only for a short couple seconds. There's only really one time that I remember where you take advantage of the bee for a good portion of a level. It's really a shame that Epic didn't put in more animal forms, as it would have made the game really feel more unique. I mean, it worked for Joe of the Jungle, an older game that predates Zargon. That game was also made by Epic, so what's the deal with utilizing more animal forms, and why aren't they here? There is some lack of animation in the game. Some of the enemies move awkwardly, but the biggest thing about the animation is that the weapons Mal shoots, they just appear. The lasers just appear from Mal's midsection. Does he shoot them? Does he magically spawn them? Or does he just hallucinate them shooting and then the monsters just don't exist? Who knows, but I don't get it. One final thing. The final stages of each game require you to navigate an area that contains a massive area of destroyable bricks. Once you get to the end of it, you need to destroy this reactor. I've already said that buying invulnerability is the easiest way to do it, but is this really all that Epic could come up with for end bosses? This is the end boss in all 3 games. The only exception is that the final boss, Zargon, appears right after the 3rd reactor. But even he's ridiculously easy. He'll shoot things at you, which you can easily just destroy, and when you get down to it, he poses no real challenge, just like the reactors. As for the ending, once you beat this evil demon, well, I'm not going to bother wasting my time with it, but I'll just say it's a huge letdown, and simply put, it's shit. Zargon is a pretty fun action game that has a few flaws. However, these flaws don't degrade from the game too much. Finding keys, killing creatures, and just playing each stage is something that doesn't get old in the game. And each environment is actually well decorated. Because of this, no one area looks the same, and you always wonder what's coming next. Best of all, this game was deemed abandonware, which means it's no longer for sale and is free to download. If you Google it, you can find downloads for all 3 episodes. Originally, only the 1st and 2nd episodes were available as freeware. I had a link I used to download the game in my description to this video, so check it out. Unless you have a DOS machine laying around, you will need to download DOSBox as well though, but it's well worth it. Final score? 8 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.